Hi, everybody. Happy Friday. So, the first thing that you're going to do today is log on again during class time. And for attendance purposes today, you're going to complete the soccer tip on Renaissance. The two is just because it's the second soccer tip I have on the Renaissance. So, again, go to soccertip.com. Weaver8556 is the passcode. Remember to put your last name first, comma, your first name, and answer the questions. This one is not for a grade, but it more closely resembles how your graded ones will be. Starting next week, I'm going to actually start to grade some of these now that you're used to the routine. The next thing we're going to do is walk you through some Renaissance art. We've talked about the Italian Renaissance and the Northern Renaissance. Hopefully you did pretty well on that soccer tip. If not, feel free to go back to my other videos and PowerPoints and so on. Again, make sure you have your notebook in front of you, and if you want to watch it once through and take no notes, and then take notes the second time or however it works for you. But again, remember, you don't need to write down every single thing. It's better to kind of come up with your own shorthand for notes. After we're done with the PowerPoint, you are going to work on this Renaissance art organizer. If this video ends up going past 20 minutes, and even if it does, don't worry about submitting this today. I believe we're going to also work on this on Monday because I don't want you guys to have to do this over the weekend. So at the end of 40 minutes, however long 40 minutes is after you start this video and anything, don't worry about submitting this today because we're going to use class time on Monday to finish it. So if you're coming in on Monday, we'll work on it in the classroom. If you're online, virtual on Monday, you'll be finishing it on your own. So again, we'll submit that Monday, but make sure you get the soccer tip done today for the Renaissance. So let's go to the PowerPoint. So we've talked about the Renaissance, the difference between the Italian and the Northern Renaissance. But now we're going to talk about art. Now we're going to talk about art in Italy and Northern, and just like we talked about the two Renaissances already, they have similarities, but they also have some differences as well. So as we go and look at the first slide, again, as we normally do, we have our objective and scale. So when you finish with the PowerPoint and going through this, I'd like you to put this 1, 2, or 3 at the bottom of your Renaissance artwork sheet that we're going to do, the one that I already said we're probably going to turn in on Monday and have class time to work on it. At the very bottom of that, I'd like you to put a 1, 2, or 3 after the lesson, which one you're feeling like. So my objective for you is that students will be able to determine the differences between the Middle Ages and Renaissance art. This also includes the differences and similarities between Northern Renaissance art and Italian Renaissance art. So if you're unable to do that when we have our little practice at the end of this, you'll be about a 1. If you're able to see the difference but not really able to fully explain why, you're going to be a 2. And if you're able to pretty easily determine the difference and explain the reasons as to why this is Middle Ages, this is Northern Renaissance, this is Italian Renaissance, you would be a 3. And we have a little exercise we're going to do at the end of this video to determine that. So Renaissance art, religion and art in the Renaissance. So the impact of humanism on art. So remember, humanism, the study of Greek and Roman classical knowledge to become well-rounded in all the humanities, art, literature, philosophy, music, and all of that stuff. So humanism is a super important word. We've gone over it a lot, so I'm not going to fully explain it every time going on in the future. So if you have any questions about what humanism is, make sure you reach out to me. So with humanism dominating literature and education, the concepts of Renaissance art the concepts of the Renaissance also bled over into visual art. So again, when we're note taking, we probably don't need to write that entire thing out. Probably like a section that says humanism can also be seen in art. So you just really are trimming down what you're putting, but getting the same messages. The reason I do it is in complete sentences is because I feel like it's easier to follow the story when it's like that. So visual art and literary art are where we can see the issues and ideas that dominate and define that time or generation. This is one of the most, we're going to talk about a lot of different art periods throughout this. Mr. Weaver isn't an art expert himself, so I don't go too deep into it, and you really don't need to for the exam. When you see art during any time in this course, and really any time in history, the important thing to remember is that it always reflects what is going on in the time period. It reflects the mood, the feelings, the discoveries during that time period. So no matter what time period we're talking about, realize that the art is always part of the bigger movement and how people are feeling and the ideas of what's going around. So during the Renaissance, humanism. Two main features that define Renaissance art and separate it from medieval or Middle Ages art. It's the emphasis on the individual and regular people rather than God. During the Middle Ages, if you created art, a lot of time artists didn't sign their work because it wasn't about that. It was about using your skill to give glory to God. During the Renaissance is really the first time that we start to know a lot of different architects and artists and painters and things of that nature because they start signing their work. They start getting famous for their work and making a lot of money off it. And doing that in the Middle Ages would have been seen as sinful because you were glorifying yourself instead of God. Also, the use of classical figures, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, a lot of ancient philosophers, and also the architecture that was used in ancient Rome and classical Greece, domes, arches, columns, everything being perfectly symmetrical. So that's two different ways of seeing this here. You can tell based on individual ideas and regular people rather than God. If that's not saying that the Renaissance still didn't create things about God and religion. Some of the most iconic images from the Renaissance have to do with religion, but other things became a focus as well. That was Mr. Andrews coming and going, by the way, so I apologize for the interruption. The use of classical figures, Socrates, Aristotle, those philosophers, and if you see any of these types of architecture, it shows that it's a Renaissance painting because they're rediscovering those ancient classical and Roman ideas, Greek and Roman ideas. This word chiaroscuro, and if there's any art people that want to correct my pronunciation on that, awesome. Basically, what that is it's a use of shading to enhance the illusion of light and make paintings look more like three-dimensional and real. That picture is a statue, not a painting, but still. So if there's light coming from one way, just like in a picture, shadows and things are going to look a certain way, and it really makes things look more three-dimensional and more real. So there you have three different ways to see how Renaissance art different than medieval or Middle Ages art. Like literature, visual art emphasized the idea that we are individual humans and worthy of being subject of art, not just God any longer. And as we said, they're going to have old classical figures, Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, and the style of architecture that the Romans and Greeks used. So hopefully now you're starting to understand and can understand the differences between them. So Renaissance work, naturalism. So with this emphasis on regular people and individual life, a much larger amount of detail and effort were put into this kind of art. A new technique, another new term here, geometric perspective, was an attempt by artists to make each painting or sculpture as accurate as possible, showing correct human anatomy. The statue of David is great. If you've ever driven down the 33, there's a replica of the statue of David there, showing humans in their real form. Linear perspective adjusted the size of figures in the painting to be more accurate. So if someone's standing far in the back, they're smaller to make them look normal size. Someone a little up close might be bigger, and so forth. Painting and sculptures portrayed real 3D characters with shading, shadows, and expression as normal humans' bodies. You know, the way you take a picture, not everybody looks the same. So in these Renaissance paintings, not everybody is going to look the same. It's going to look more natural. Raphael's School of Athens is a perfect example of that we'll look at in a minute. And additionally, rather than simply painting God or these heroic figures, art began to show regular people in regular situations. Leonardo da Vinci, the Mona Lisa is an example of that. We're going to look at this art coming up here. So this right here you see is medieval art. You can see that clearly by looking at these, they don't look like real pictures. If you look down at this, you know, they're kind of distorted figures. The coloring isn't what you would normally see. No, like you wouldn't walk into a building and see this type of color and that type of thing. And there's not a lot of detail that goes into the human bodies here. Same thing over here. All of these people look the exact same, and you can see their faces sticking out here, but it's not accurate. This person looks so much bigger because that's where it wants your attention to go. And there's no way all those people could be that close together. Everyone looks the exact same. There's not a lot of natural expression. There's not a lot of focus on the individuals in these paintings. So this is some examples of medieval art. Again here, so this shows a bit more of individual, but still by clearly looking at it, you can tell that it's you know, it doesn't look real or natural. Things are a little bit distorted. The coloring isn't very accurate. There's a lot of things that are off with it. So one of the most important artists that we're going to talk about is Leonardo da Vinci, and you can see some of his famous works over here on the side. He's one of the biggest artists, scientist, inventor, and revolutionist of the Renaissance. One of many artists to reintroduce these new old ideas, as we call it. Da Vinci painted The Last Supper, which begins to show how he wanted to reveal people's inner thoughts and beings through art and paintings. Like if you were to look at this bottom picture of The Last Supper, everybody is engaged in some type of conversation or some type of event. Like you can look at them and create some type of story with them. Usually, what I do here in class is I ask my students to all take a minute, find a partner, pick one of these people, and create a backstory for them based on what you see. What's going on in this picture? Here you see the detail. This almost looks like a photograph taken at the time, the famous Mona Lisa, and it really puts an emphasis on the individual. You can also see the symmetry right down the middle, equal on both sides for the most part. But remember, just because the Renaissance is going to focus on other things besides religion, the Last Supper is a religious painting with Jesus in it. So just because the Renaissance is going to become more secular doesn't mean that religion isn't going to be involved, because even in the Renaissance, the church is still going to be one of the biggest patrons or people buying and paying for this art. Another one, Raphael. This is a zoomed in picture of the School of Athens. So if you look at this picture, and if you want to pause it for a second, what about this picture that you see here shows you that it's Renaissance? Some things that stick out to me, the very vivid colors of it, the individual detail that goes into each person, the exact symmetry right down the middle. I see pillars, I see up here, I see an arch, I see classical figures, ancient Greek philosophers. So are all way to tell that it's Renaissance painting. So Raphael, again, an artist of the Renaissance, painted School of Athens. This is like the Renaissance picture. So you want to pick, a couple by each artist in case you get a short answer question that asks, describe how a certain painting during the Renaissance shows that it's Renaissance. Like this is the perfect one to use because there's so many examples that you can use in it. And this is just kind of a bigger picture of it. You can see the symmetry, the arches, and a lot of classical figures and philosophers that are in that picture. Donatello's David. This is a smaller size David than the one we're used to, but actually, believe it or not, this one came first. Donatello is also a sculptor and artist from the time period. If you think about all the Ninja Turtles, that's what the Ninja Turtles are all named after. Michelangelo, the statue of David right here, probably one of the most of his influential works, also painting the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. So again, David is a biblical character that painted a chapel, again, ties to religion. So just because these people started showing Renaissance ideas doesn't mean religion was cut out. Again, the church was still one of the biggest patrons of the art. So knowing these different artists, and we're going to go through some of their works, you don't need to memorize every single one of them with their works. Usually I say pick like 3 or 4 artists that you really know well and like 2 pieces of work that go with each one. And more importantly, how does each work reflect the time period and how does it show those Renaissance characteristics that we've already begun to talk about? So patrons of the art. Renaissance art became so popular that it started a new trend, hiring Renaissance artists and painters to sculpt or build stuff for yourself. People are going to have portraits of their families created, sculptures of themselves created, things that during the Middle Ages would have been seen as very, very sinful. So princes, merchants, and other people, patrons, people buying things, hired artists to point themselves and their family in this geometric, real perspective, making them look as real as possible. The Catholic Church is also going to hire a lot of Renaissance artists to sculpt and design religious statues and buildings. So again, just because there's a lot of things that are important in the Renaissance that have nothing to do with religion does not mean that religion in the Catholic Church still didn't play a major role. And we've already talked about Michelangelo and his sculptors and painters. I'm going to say this. It's Andrea Palladio. Again, not super important, but I want you to recognize the name as an Italian artist. Really, he doesn't come up very much, but just he's a very famous architect that worked on symmetry. You can see some of his examples in the background of pillars straight down, and I'm sure you've seen houses and other buildings like this as well. Not as important as some of the other Renaissance painters. Another one, Brunelleschi, is another one that he designed the Florence Cathedral right here. You can see the symmetry and the dome. These two people, you might see their names pop up, and when you do, I just want you to think of Renaissance architects, and just realize what they contributed to the Renaissance. But again, you don't see these two as much as you see the ones that are named for the Ninja Turtles. William Shakespeare, also more of the Northern Renaissance, but we like to include him. Doesn't come up very often on AP, but is really important because he started to write in the English vernacular, which is, you should know from past lectures, is the spoken common language of a people in England, obviously English. He's also going to create so many new terms. I pulled it up on, if I jump out of my slide here, he came up with so many different phrases and words. He was the first one to use lonely, skim milk, apparently, watchdog, use the slogan break the ice. A lot of these I've never heard of before. Fair play, a laughing stock, in a pickle. Words that we still use today in the common English language were invented in a lot of William Shakespeare's works, and I'm sure you've talked about him a ton in English class. Dante's Divine Comedy is another book. You can see it really begins before our class starts. Do not write this slide down, please. Basically, this is important because it was one of the very first and most popular books that was written in the Italian vernacular, or the Italian language, and it's basically just his journey through the 9 circles of hell. Again, you don't need to memorize this or look at it. I just want you to remember that Dante's Divine Comedy was one of the first Italian vernacular books, paving the way for more vernacular books to come out in different languages in the future. Same thing about the Canterbury Tales. Same thing as the book we just looked at, except this one is one of the first ones that takes place in English. Again, not really important. It's before our time period, so you won't see it pop up, but it's just good to have a little bit of background of when the vernacular in these books started taking place. Again, not necessary to write down this slide. And we've already talked about the printing press, so I'm going to zip through this. All of these ideas from the Italian Renaissance were able to spread north and around. And as we get to the Protestant Reformation, know that the printing press being invented and popularized in the 1450s is going to spread Renaissance ideas, Protestant Reformation's ideas like wildfire. It's going to increase literacy, spread information much quicker, and as I said, eventually help Martin Luther spread his 95 Theses. So the Northern Renaissance, basically everything we just looked at was Italian. So if you remembered what we talked about Northern is going to have more of a religious focus and also more of a common people focus. The Renaissance was more for wealthy patrons, and yes, still individual people, but it was a lot of wealthy people and nobles that were having themselves created and funded because they were the ones to afford it. When we look at the Northern Renaissance, we're going to look at how it's going to portray more individual people, a lot of peasant work and landscapes and so forth. So the Northern Renaissance retained a more religious focus, which resulted in more human-centered naturalism that considered individuals in everyday life appropriate objects of artistic representation. So I would say the Italian art is going to be more of like this elitist type thing to show off, look at my wealth, look at my prestige, and the church is going to use it for the same thing. In the North, that does happen, but there's going to be a lot more art focused on peasants and just normal everyday lifestyle. So the Northern Renaissance is going to use a lot of oil paintings, realistic art. They're going to do a lot of wood carvings as well and engravings. Unlike Italian artists, Northern painters were not interested in rediscovering the spirit of ancient Greece. Instead, they sought to exploit the full potential of oil paint and capture nature exactly as they found it. So while Italy spends a lot of time looking back and having those classical figures, you're really not going to see those too much in Northern Renaissance art. It's going to be more about landscapes and seeing things right now as they see it, including common people. And again, naturalism is exactly what it sounds like, seeing things in their natural state, regular everyday people, everyday life. And we're going to look at some Northern Renaissance artists now. This first one that we're going to look at, Durer at 27, is going to paint this self-portrait. Again, you could look at that and say, I think that's Italian Renaissance. It's himself in a lot of detail. The picture didn't translate great over to this, but he was doing himself kind of portraying himself as Jesus, not because he thought he was Jesus or God or anything else, but he was kind of doing a self-portrait, trying to get himself to resemble Jesus. So you see kind of the religious aspect of it. But then years later, this is him right here drawing a picture of himself, drawing a picture, and you can see it's weird. And if you look it up, if you look up his self portrait, you can see probably a clearer picture of it. But he's depressed. He's going through some mental and psychological issues. So from the age of 27, like you have this perfect, wonderful, accurate picture. And then this is still very talented, but it goes from seeing a clear mind to kind of one that was going through a self-described depression and some other things. So it just kind of showed you that people in their paintings were showing that real naturalism of how they really feel and what life was really like, something you wouldn't have really seen during the Middle Ages. Jean Van Eyck is another one. This Arnolfo wedding is an oil painting on wood. Remember, we said oil paintings and wood engravings were very popular in the North. Again, this is one of the coolest things about this picture is if you look back in this mirror, and again, you might want to pull it up on actually Google. If you look into that mirror, it's a reflection of the person painting them and their kind of backsides reflecting in the mirror, which I think is an incredible amount of detail. Again, this isn't focused on really God or anything, but it shows everyday people. Pieter Bruegel, the elder, he was a Dutch painter. He loved to paint landscape and peasant scenes. So, I mean, this could have been Buffalo back in the day. It's not Buffalo. But people ice skating, enjoying the winter. He must be up on a hill, just kind of painting again, showing everyday people and landscapes and naturalism what it was like. Again, you can see this is more of a much more chaotic village, but again, hopefully you can see that this is Northern Renaissance because its everyday scene focuses on regular people, naturalism going about their day. So again, these are the key concepts that same thing. You don't need to write these down. You just need to kind of go through these yourself and ask yourself, do I understand this part of it? The Southern Renaissance began during the 14th century, while the Northern Renaissance was believed to have started during the 16th century. The Southern Italian Renaissance came first, spread north. The northern part of Europe is strongly attached to Christianity and the church. We talked about that. So whenever you see these key concepts pop up, and they'll always be numbered, it's just kind of a good check-in for you to see where you're really at. Okay, so now we're going to look at these pictures and you're going to tell me whether you think they are Italian or Northern. So this is going to kind of help you with that 1, 2, 3 objective scale to see how well you do. So if you want a second, pause it and look at the picture and try to come up with your own conclusion before I do. So what do you think? Is this Northern or Italian? And more importantly, can you figure out why? All right, I'm going to give you the answer. So pause it if you want. I'm not going to give you that long. This is Northern. You can see that it shows a lot of landscape. You can see that it shows, everyday people kind of in everyday life. So Northern here. What about this one? All right, so this one is the Italian Renaissance. Now, the vivid colors should help tell you that a little bit. If you realize right here, they're building the Trojan horse, a story from ancient Greece. Therefore, it's showing, focus on the classics and going back in, Greek and Roman influence. Therefore, you know that it's the Italian Renaissance. All right, this one right here. So this one is also Italian. Now, this is clearly a religion. You see angels. Remember, the Italian Renaissance didn't get rid of religion. It's just going to focus on other things in addition to religion. But the key detail that goes into this painting isn't really focused on regular people, but instead angels in this biblical scene. Cool picture. And this is probably an image that was paid for by the church. This one I'm hoping is easy. So Italian or Northern, which one are you thinking? The answer is Northern. Again, Northern. It's a landscape scene. It shows a normal day in a village focused on naturalism, regular people, and so forth. I think this one's a good one to kind of question yourself a little bit. So if you want to pause it, which one do you think this one is, Italian or Northern? This one is Northern. So the detail that goes into the characters is pretty good. It's a little distorted because it's blown up so big. The reason I know that this is Northern is because it shows regular people. Look at the way that they're dressed. Look at, they're sitting on some wooden table kind of close together. In Italy, like I said, it's going to be more of a focus on the individual, but most of the people that were paying for these things were wealthy nobles and merchants that had a lot of money. Here, it seems to be a typical kind of peasantry, which you would see in the north, that really showed that naturalism of things. Down here, and this is the last one that we're going to look at. This one is Italian. Hopefully, you should look down and see the symmetry in it, the vivid colors, and obviously, this isn't a real scene. This isn't focused on regular people. Look at the way these people are dressed. It has a religious aspect to it as well. You can see baby Jesus in a manger over here praying. Okay, and again, Italian, Northern, and again, you have your key concepts at the end. So I hope this was helpful between the two. This video has been going for a while, so tell you what, you should have already completed the Socrative for your attendance. So we'll go back to Schoology, and you have this Renaissance Art Organizer. If you open this, you're going to open it with Kami, so hopefully you have that installed, and it's going to look something like this. You can pick, so I want you to basically, normally we do some type of gallery walk in my class. Obviously, we can't do that right now. I'd like you to Google these pictures and fill in the boxes using the text box over here to describe what you see. You can see at the top, I have this little note. You may exclude 2 works of art from this chart, whichever 2 you want. So if you're having trouble finding one or describing one, you don't have to do it. There's 2 Davids here. Keep in mind there's Michelangelo's David and Donatello's David, so that should help you. Again, you do not need to submit this today. This is actually going to be the work that you turn in for Monday, so don't turn this in today. You don't have to work on it for homework. Thank you for paying attention to this lecture, and we will work on this during class on Monday, whether it's online or in person. Thank you so much. Enjoy your weekend. Reach out to me if you have any questions or need anything. Thanks.